The Nintendo Wii. Everyone has one, and everyone has the same handful of games for it. Today I thought I'd try and introduce you to some lesser known games for the Wii that are worth giving a try. Lost in Shadow. The game begins with a nameless boy's shadow being detached and thrown off a tower, and from there, your objective is to scale the tower to reunite with your body. Playing as the shadow of a character gives way to numerous interesting visual segments and creative perspective puzzles. Moment-to-moment gameplay boils down to the typical slow platforming of a cinematic platformer, like Prince of Persia or Limbo, with some basic puzzle solving which often amounts to pointing the Wiimote at the screen. I'd hesitate to call it a narrative game, but there's definitely something that draws you in besides the rather simplistic gameplay, be it the unique visuals or constant innovation of the core shadow gimmick. What's most striking about the game is the tragically forlorn atmosphere, informed by the fantastic use of music, nostalgic colour direction, and the plot revolving around uniting with yourself. The game's tone and emphasis on aesthetics is highly reminiscent of Ico, Journey, Braid, and the aforementioned Limbo, so if you enjoyed any of those games this might be worth checking out. Rodea the Sky Soldier. You may have heard generally negative things about this game because the Wii U and 3DS versions of Rodea the Sky Soldier were panned for feeling kinda dated and having lackluster visuals for those platforms. But that's because the game actually completed development in 2011, and the publisher, who were likely reluctant to release the game on a soon-to-be obsolete console, held off the release of the original Wii version until the underwhelming next-generation ports were ready in 2015. Though the only version of the game developed by the original developers, a company of ex-Sonic Team employees going under the name Prope, the Wii disc was only released as a bundle with the Wii U version. Consequently, the Wii version of the game is a rarity, with copies selling for a fair amount on eBay. An issue compounded with the game's unfavourable reviews, which only made the game and this version of it that much more obscure. This is all a crying shame because Rodea the Sky Soldier feels like the final great swan song on the Wii. A title showing off the technical capabilities of the console, while utilising a control scheme only possible on the system. The feeling while zipping around the screen and honing into enemies is strikingly similar to 3D Sonic titles. But unlike those games, the control scheme and your floaty character means that you feel in control at all times. The story's nothing to write home about, but it facilitates for a number of interesting locations and spectacular boss battles. Rodea the Sky Soldier is a quintessential example of a game that can only be accomplished on the Wii, which is probably why the other ports of the game were so critically panned. Cursed Mountain. Compared to the previous two games, which were wonderfully unique and artistically inspired, Cursed Mountain feels like a bit of a B-movie. And sure, in a lot of ways, like the by-the-numbers story and kinda clunky controls, Cursed Mountain falls into many of the tropes of a generic schlocky survival horror game. But credit where it's due, this game excels in a lot of areas one wouldn't expect for a Wii horror title. For one, the game looks incredible. Granted, upscaling it with Dolphin makes some texture quality and background animation shortcuts quite apparent, but for a game running on a glorified GameCube, Cursed Mountain has moments of real visual splendour, and it's one of few Wii games that look decent while striving for a realistic aesthetic. And it's not only the technical graphical quality, but the locations that are being realised. Most of the game you're fighting mysterious zombie enemies, in various Buddhist villages, in the shadow of mountains in the Himalayas. Rarely is this location or the Buddhist faith explored in video games, especially not in a horror game, and it adds a really compelling backdrop to the game's events. Like many survival horror games of this era, Cursed Mountain has a deliberately slower pace and restrictive controls. This definitely won't satisfy everyone, but for fans of this style, this game is a must play on the Wii.
MLB Power Pros!
Another entry in the incredibly long-running Konami baseball series, running since 1994 in fact. And would you believe in all those years, MLB Power Pros released in 2007 was the first attempt to localize the series in the West. To longtime fans of this series, this entry is nothing too spectacular, though obviously easier to navigate due to it being in English. and ultimately that's the strongest positive the game has for those wanting to get into the series. This entry features all the same excellently refined gameplay, charming and expressive animation, and clean visuals, finally delivered in an accessible English language package, with a familiar roster of North American teams. It's funny to say given it does have such a casual exterior, but the Power Pros franchise is easily the best baseball game series. Exclusive to the Wii version there is a bonus motion control batting mode, but otherwise this is just another excellent iteration on the consistently great Power Pros series. It's also worth noting that this is the only game in the video that supports the GameCube controller. Blox. Blox is a physics-based game that uses its engine to provide a lot of unique gameplay styles. There are levels like Crush the Castle or Angry Birds where the objective is to simply collapse a structure or destroy as much as possible, levels that play more like Jenga, levels where you're restricted and have to use the game's physics to destroy the blocks in a creative way, and even some defense-orientated game modes. Though its presentation is pretty basic, arguably that's to the game's favour as the simplistic blocky design of everything results in the game's assets being easily reused for a variety of game types. The game's aesthetic is minimal and intuitive, while still being charming and enjoyable, and these qualities seep into the controls, which are instantly easy to play with and allow for a great amount of freedom. What from the outside looks like a cheaply produced shovelware title is surprisingly really competently made and a joy to play. Two immensely interesting factoids about this game is that alongside the Wii version there was a version released for the handheld system the N-Gage, and most bizarrely the Hollywood director Steven Spielberg has his name attached to this project. Most places credit Spielberg as the designer of the game, and when he was questioned about his decision to develop Blox, he stated he just wanted to play a game with his kids, which is really wholesome. Thank you very much for watching. If you appreciate this video, be sure to drop a like, and if you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe. Have a nice day, peace.